Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News meathead and current defense secretary, who visited Capitol Hill this week for a hearing that can only be described as not great. Here's Michigan Senator Gary Peters welcoming Hegseth to the Hill.
Because I use the word failure to their leaders. You, sir, are the failure, not the men and women who are on that front line, not the men and women who hold up their honor with distinction. But if there's a lack of a winning strategy, they're in harm's way. Their leaders have failed them. And that's what's happening. We have political leadership. You don't have a strategy. You don't have a long-term plan to actually win this war. Win the war. The men and women are going to be able to do it, but they need to have leadership. When will you show leadership? When will you show leadership?
Yeah, Gary Peters, why don't you run the Department of Defense instead? And that wasn't the only person to call Pete Hegseth a failure. Republican Congressman Don Bacon also weighed in and said that. Hegseth facing heavy criticism from both sides after mishandling the Pentagon budget. He's now expanding the war in Iran. And the fact that old Petey doesn't seem to know what's actually going on in his own department. Now, Mike, Hegseth was visiting the Hill to get some money for the Pentagon. He wanted $67 billion more to pay for Iran on top of the $1.5 trillion he already got. Pete really seemed to think this was going to go well. What's your take?
It was interesting because he wasn't at the onset and even throughout the really, really wise ass Pete Hegseth. Like, he kind of knew that, to your point, he needed to somehow convince them he needed this money. He needed to be a little more serious. Of course, a little more serious for him is not anything that is remotely professional or makes the case, but he really was trying not to come off too wise ass. It was still coming out. And to get slammed by Republicans, even Senator Kennedy from Louisiana really pushing him as well, it just showed you that Republicans are losing a lot of patience with the administration. Does it mean they'll vote against, giving the money? Does it mean that they're going to decide to rein him in on the war? No, because they haven't yet. I mean, well, they did in one vote, but then we had another vote on the War Powers Resolution, and they failed to take control. So I don't know how much it really means, but it does show that they are getting very, very impatient. We're just 4 months from the election. They're worried.
Yeah. And Hegseth's big thing when he was confirmed was military readiness. We're going to make the military ready for anything. But here he is. He's asking for more money. He just announced that they want to move $4 billion from troop training and weapons training into the Iran War Fund because they're out of money because they miscalculated the costs. I mean, it seems like under Hegseth, the morale is lower. The Pentagon is less ready than ever. I mean, are you seeing that as well?
It's clear that they don't have the money that they need. They've burned it through dramatically. They don't know where it's going from here. They really don't know what they're going to need. They haven't rethought how they use weapons. We are using weapons that cost billions of dollars, while Iran is using these drones that cost them nothing. They haven't figured out how to kind of do this without going through all of this, weaponry that costs billions of dollars. So that's a big problem. They also don't know what's going to happen in terms of the future. Trump is talking about ramping up and going, full scale into major combat operations. We've got medics going to the Army hospital in Germany. 150 of them were sent there, whether that was for the injuries that have already been incurred in the attack on the base in Jordan, or they're expecting more injuries. We don't know. So he doesn't even know what is happening and can't even ask them for something based on what will really happen. I think that's part of the problem here. The other part of the problem is, as you said about morale, the troops themselves, they have certainly not been prepared for this. They didn't prepare the American people. They didn't prepare voters. Trump didn't make the case on the war. It's doubtful that they really made the case to those who are serving as well. They don't know why they're there. They don't want to be there. This is a disaster all across the board in terms of both the American people and the troops.
And it's so much more than just Iran, too. People may not know the Pentagon runs one of the largest childcare networks in the country. 172,000 kids are members of the Pentagon's childcare program. The Pentagon now saying they don't have the money to fund 19,000 childcare workers they're going to need to take care of those kids. So now you have even soldiers and families that are at home are starting to be affected by this. But I do want to talk more about Iran because that is our fourth big story of the week. This feels like it's been a story every week. Time to change our sign again because the war is officially back on, and Donald Trump is threatening to expand the scope of the war unless Iran surrenders. Stop me if you've heard this one before, Mike. Prominent Republicans are now saying it's time to wrap this disaster up. It's been a massive drain on American readiness, on our economy, including Speaker Mike Johnson and now Senator Rand Paul. Here was Rand Paul this week talking about why the Iran war is actually hurting America.
It threatens our country. You know, the biggest threat we have right now is our debt. We are more in danger of devaluing our currency than we are of Iran invading the United States.
Well, the defense secretary testified that for national security, it is critical that they get the money that they are asking for. What would you say to someone that says the actual danger that the country is put in is if the Pentagon can't fund it?
I would say that he's mistaken the problem. The greatest threat to our national security is our debt. That's what Admiral Mullen said 10 years ago, and it's gotten 10 times worse.
Mike, I'm agreeing with Rand Paul. I may need some mental health care. What do you think of this whole debacle?
Well, Rand Paul is, the ultimate stopped clock, right? That's twice
Yeah.
a day is right. He hits on it, right? He doesn't always vote the right way. He'll say all of this stuff and then he'll cave in. And then sometimes he does. Sometimes he's the one vote that, is standing up. I mean, he's telling the truth about the debt and the money and what we're talking about with regard to spending all of this money that we don't have, that we have squandered and that we are unable to use for programs in this country. We right now have, beyond the issue of affordability and inflation and healthcare and all of these other issues, Donald Trump's tariff regime fell apart. The big bad bill, they had based part of it on paying for things through those tariffs. He's coming up with a whole new tariff scheme to try to make up the money. They realize that it's all fallen apart in terms of how they're going to bring in money, and they are overspending like crazy. I mean, these are the people who used to attack Democrats for spending money. Democrats at least always made sure they could pay for it when they spent money.
Yeah. And Donald Trump seems to be the only Republican who's not aware of how big a problem this is. He announced yesterday to Axios that he's weighing what he calls a massive attack against Iran, even as the price of oil has already topped $100 a barrel. Inflation, as you note, is starting to pick up again. I mean, Mike, didn't Trump promise us this would be a 2-week war?
He said 2 weeks, and then he said another 2 weeks, and then he said another 2 weeks, and then he said another 2 weeks. He also doesn't seem to see that there is no winning here. From the beginning, it was clear, as soon as the Strait of Hormuz was taken, that Iran had its nuclear weapon. That was it. They were going to use it. No amount of escalation of bombing, none of that is going to do anything. He's the one who said he wanted to protect the civilians of Iran. He was going to make sure they were, not being murdered anymore. He was going to liberate them in the beginning, right? And help them to overthrow. So is he now saying he's going to start killing the civilians? That's not going to really play well in the region. He's really stuck. This is a quagmire. It's going to go on for a long time. And he doesn't get it that continued bombing is only going to make it worse.
Yeah. So how should Democrats be talking about this? We always say voters don't care as much about foreign policy. They care about what's at home. But this seems to be one of those conflicts that is making things worse at home. I mean, not just slowing the economy, but raising prices on everything.
I think Democrats have been hitting on that issue, and they now have even more ammunition because, to your point, I Americans don't follow foreign policy, but they do when it connects to something that affects them in their everyday lives. And they've already seen that when the war escalated and when the strait was closed and when the price of oil skyrocketed, the price of gas skyrocketed. Then when we had the ceasefire, it actually came down a little bit. Oil stabilized and gas prices, they never went down to the $3 a gallon, but they came down below $4 a gallon. So Americans were able to see precisely what happened, the connection to the war. And now they saw oil surge again and the price of gas go up over $4 a gallon. I think for Democrats, that is like the ironclad proof of how the war is affecting you in your pocketbook, that you're going to buy gas and it's affecting all the groceries too. Anything that can't get through the Strait of Hormuz, fertilizer, all these other items, and then how it affects farming and everything else. All of it is affecting people in terms of their prices. And then he's ramping up tariffs again. So that one people really get as well. I mean, Democrats have a lot here to work with.